Hello, iToaster here, and it's been a little while since the last proper video for Eternal, hasn't it? I do apologize for that. It has been quite some time and quite a stressful time at that, I will not lie. A lot of things have been going on behind the scenes in terms of real life, job stuff, etc., etc. It's all stuff for another video at some point, but regardless of how much work is stressing me out and everything like that, we're still working on Eternal in the background. Whenever we can, we're sitting down, we're just duking it out and figuring out, like, what can we change? What makes it feel better, look better, play better, things like that. And the big reason there hasn't been a real update is because I didn't want there to be a 0.5.5 update. I wanted the next update for Eternal to actually have a new faction in it. I'm tired of 3 factions. 3 factions is part of what killed Dawn of War 3. I don't want to get stuck on it. So we have been working on the 4th faction. It is Chaos, actually, so if you like the Dark Gods, good news for you. And the design of Chaos is actually spearheaded by Helpless Celt, my friend who's been helping me out with the mod. Celt also did the design for the Eldar as well, and I had already done the design for the Space Marines and the Imperial Guard, so figured time for Celt to get another faction. Plus, I actually don't know a whole lot about Chaos, truth be told. I've got some friends that do, but I'm not the best with them, in all reality. I'm pretty good with the Imperial factions and some of the others, but not so much Chaos, surprisingly. I'll go over more of what sort of stuff Chaos has in the future, but today I'm going to go over some of like the balance changes, the technical stuff, etc. that you're going to expect in Update 0.6. In the next video after this, I will also showcase some of the new additions we've been adding, because the 3 existing factions are not going to be just carryover. We have added new stuff to everything. It's actually some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen in Dawn of War 2, and if you have played the Codex mod, you might have an idea of what's coming, because we actually have been talking a lot with Karos, the developer of the Codex mod, and working with him very closely to get a lot of stuff done. So Karos and the people that are helping him and whatnot, they've been a huge, huge help to us. And again, if you've played Codex, you might have an idea of what's coming. Now, first of all, I did want to note that Eternal, I did improperly list it as a beta. Beta does imply that it is feature complete. It is not. Eternal obviously is very far from feature complete, and we're actively working on adding more and more to it. So, the next update will be Alpha 0.6, not Beta 0.6, properly named this time. But that does not mean we've gone backwards. That's just changing the name, and it's going to change and stay that way until it is properly a beta. Now, as far as software goes, we had to change the installer because our previous installer was going to cap out at 2 gigabytes, and the mod, it's not actually over 2 gigs yet. With Chaos in there, the mod size is now about 1.9 gigabytes, so just barely under 2. But with that said, we got to make the prep work now for the other factions as well, because we got to do Orcs and Tyranids and potentially other new factions after that. So we switched the installer to a new one that can support much bigger file sizes in the future. So it's going to be a simpler installer, just a little window, no big full screen thing anymore. And Eternal also now runs off an exe file and has a DLL injector, the same one that is used by Codex and was developed by user Bruiser Band specifically over on their team. It is an incredible piece of tech, honestly. Works around a lot of the hard-coded limitations of Dawn of War 2. That's how they were able to get new factions. That's how they were able to get new game modes and things like that. And we've started taking advantage of this already. Eternal now uses its own config file, so if you make any army paints within Eternal, there's no more worry about them being deleted if you go to vanilla or you go to a different mod. Eternal will always have your painted armies saved and ready to use when you return, no matter what you do. And of course, I did mention new game modes. We're not really working on those yet, but we did add 2 new game modes that I know have been highly requested for a while: Free-for-All and Team Free-for-All Annihilate. The injector does allow us to increase the draw distance and pull the camera back a little bit further as well, I don't want to pull the camera back super far because I think that there's a little bit of strategy involved in your limited field of view, but a little extra zoom does help. Problem with the draw distance increase is that it causes a huge performance hit if you try to do like cinematic shots. And I know there are people out there that make really cool videos with like a lot of cinematic shots, and it's going to really hamper them. So I don't know if we're going to include that draw distance increase and the camera pullback. But it's just a thought. We're looking into it and we'll see what happens. Now, next up, the user interface. I'm still working on unifying it, so you'll see the main menu has received another minor makeover, and you'll see that some of the other menus within the game have also now received new buttons to sort of coordinate with that style. And we've also changed the text to try and make it more clear where we can. So the Army Painter, for example, no longer says back and accept. It now says quit without saving and save changes, which is what the buttons actually did the whole time. It just wasn't very clear that they did that. And that's just an example of something that we changed. I know there's a couple others as well, but they're skipping my mind right now. Getting to the actual in-game stuff, we've also got the resources now placed in 6 little individual bars above the user interface. So you've got your requisition, your income, your power income, your battle points, and your army points. And I will get to those two in just a bit, but nice, easy to read area. And the build menu and the war gear menu are also now, they're no longer like that little compact one. They're nice and big and easy to read. Might be a little too big for some people, but I really want it to be easy on the eyes more than anything else, because I personally struggle with getting headaches when I stare at a screen or if I have to like focus on something really small. And likewise with Kelt just has really bad vision in general. So, you know, having the bigger UI really helps us out with this. And I think it's going to help a lot of other users as well. And I don't think it's particularly intrusive to anyone that doesn't necessarily need that. Likewise, we've also done some more minor stuff like selection rings and stuff are a little easier to see, and etc, etc. It's all a work in progress. We've also got some like minor lighting effects on the buildings themselves that indicate production. Not all of them have it right now. I'll probably try to make it so they do by the time 0.6 comes out, but most of them do at the moment. Where you have like a yellow sort of glow coming out of something somewhere that will indicate that a tech is being researched, and a red glow somewhere that indicates a unit's being produced. We've also got some more custom voices, like a lot more custom voices. They're mostly Dawn of War imports, but like Dawn of War 1, but regardless, it's going to be nice to not hear the same voice quite so many times. Moving on to balance changes, the Space Marines and the Eldar are the ones that have received the most changes. The Imperial Guard, I think everyone can pretty much agree they're in a pretty good spot. There were obviously some outliers, some units that needed some buffs and stuff like that, but those have been taken care of, and those are pretty minor compared to the major stuff that we've done to the Space Marines and Eldar, because we had a lot, starting with the Space Marines, we had a lot of people saying that Space Marines were too expensive and too overpowered, both. That's going to be a hard one to fix, when you think about it. So what we've done is we've dropped the unit count. I know Eternals has a lot of like bigger scale stuff, but we did drop the unit count by 1 for each squad. So you now got 4 Marines in a standard squad, 3 in a Devastator, which is actually the same as vanilla in that case, which has reduced their cost and also reduced their damage output and their health. Now, I did increase the health and damage of each individual Marine a little bit, so it kind of splits the difference. It's not as much as it was with the extra person in the squad, but it's a little more so that each individual Marine now feels a little tankier, a little more powerful, etc., without it getting into that overpowered and overly expensive territory. I've also dropped health regeneration a lot for the Marines, and that's really going to emphasize the usage of apothecaries on the squads that can get them, because apothecaries now actually will give a 3 times healing bonus as opposed to the 2 times bonus that they give in 0.5.4. We've changed a couple of times where things can start coming out, so for the 1st company and the 5th company, you'll be able to get your Grey Knights and your Dreadnoughts right off the bat at Tier 2. You don't have to build a comms relay, and you don't have to research any hero upgrades or whatever to get access to those. Second you hit Tier 2, you can bring down that Grey Knight squad, you can bring down those regular Dreadnoughts because they should have been in the build menu anyway, truth be told. And you're also going to find that the Reserve Company now still has access to the multi-laser turret, just like the 1st and 5th Company do. They haven't lost access to the Heavy Bolter, they're just going to get both. There's actually been more reworks to the 5th Company as well, but I'm going to go over those a little more when I go into the new additions in the next video. Not so much right now, because 5th Company, they weren't really in a good place, and I think they're in a much better place now with some new stuff. So we'll talk about that. But moving on to the Eldar, the biggest thing was that it was pretty clear the shields weren't really working like we wanted them to, and the Eldar also weren't really doing enough damage. They also have like no heavy infantry counters. So what I've done is I've dialed back the shields a lot. The energy is now much lower. It's like between 100 and 200 for the units, and you can still research upgrades that's going to increase that. But those techs are going to now increase the health of the units as well, just like any other faction. The health of the units has also been increased, of course, to compensate for this reduction in energy, and the units will gain health with every level up, just like any other faction. Energy regeneration was also dropped, so shields are going to be much more of like you sit at home, you charge them up, you go out, and they're this sort of hit and run feel, a little more anyway. The damage of pretty much every weapon for the Eldar was also buffed, because they just were underperforming. For a hit and run group, like, they needed more damage, and especially against heavy infantry. They weren't doing well against Space Marines. Nothing really was able to damage them, and as I actually found out, even while recording footage for this very video. So what I'm saying right now is actually a change I've made after I recorded the footage for this. You're going to find that the scatter lasers, the pulse lasers, and the star cannons are now going to be your heavy infantry counters. So you're going to have a little bit of an area of effect even on the pulse lasers and star cannons, and you should find that they're in a much better place now. But damage across the board has been improved, so they'll be better against everything. Especially the Fire Prism. The Fire Prism has actually seen one of the biggest changes, because the Fire Prism was mostly running on its vanilla balancing, surprisingly, and that really wasn't working. So it's been altered, and you're going to find that the Focused Beam now does a ton more damage against vehicles, as opposed to before where it only claimed it did and then was kind of a letdown when you actually went to go and use it. There's also been a couple of squad reworks on the Eldar as well. Pathfinders, for example, they've gotten a huge overhaul, new abilities, new weapons, things like that, which I think is going to make them a lot more useful. And we've also got some other stuff, which, again, more on that later. Now, globally, I did say I was going to get back to those battle points and those army points, so let me go over those now for you real quick. So, battle points are the red resource. It had a different name depending on which faction you were playing, and I didn't like calling it the red resource, and I don't think anyone ever refers to it as the names of those resources within the factions. Maybe I've heard people call it Zeal because, you know, Space Marines, but everything had a different name. And internally, funny enough, the red resource is actually called Wa, like as in Orc Wa. Basically, I just wanted to change it. It's now just called battle points. We're going to stick with something like that. I don't know if we're going to call them battle points in the long run, but it's just a unified name for the time being so that we know what we're referring to when we say the red resource. Battle points, because then you highlight it, you see the tooltip, it says battle points, it's not going to say Zeal, you're not going to go and try to use an ability, it's not going to yell at you to get more command or more psychic might. You'll know what you're seeing when you see a tooltip that says battle points. And we're no longer capping them at 1,000 either. You can go up much higher, you can go to I think 10,000 or even beyond at this point. I forget what I said to, I think I might have set the limit to 100,000. And this is important because battle points are way more important now than they were before. I've changed some of the way global abilities work back, so you're going to see a lot more usage of those battle points to actually call down units and things like that, especially like hero units and whatnot. I want battle points to very much be a hero-focused thing, so your commanders, your sub-heroes, things like Seer Council, Stern Guards, things like that, or chaplains, shadow seers, they're going to all have their war gear cost battle points instead of requisition or power. And this way, you can use those to specifically upgrade your heroes, and you can save your requisition and power just to work on your main army. Literally all war gear for commanders is going to be purchased with battle points. They're not huge costs, but they're enough that you really have to think about what you're doing, and it's really interesting to have these sort of two separate resource systems within the game. And as a result, of course, the battle point cost on things like sergeants and whatnot has been completely removed. We're sticking with just requisition and power for the main army. The only units that will still require that are going to be super units, things like the Fell Blade, the Land Raider, the Bane Blade, etc., etc. And of course, moving on to army points, I did mention that as well. It's just the population system with a new name. And you might notice a much bigger number. I had this bug on my butt that I don't like the standard population system, you know? I don't like that idea that we're just making up these numbers out of nowhere in something like Warhammer. People have played tabletop Warhammer for ages. They've gotten used to these ideas of what units should cost on the tabletop. They flip through rule books, they know what these units cost. And this is all information that's pretty easy to get at, so we're just basing the population off of 10th edition rules now. I don't see why not. Now, there's some changes, of course. Not all the population values line up correctly, and some of them just wouldn't make any sense in a setting like Dawn of War, so we did have to increase some, mostly increases. I don't think there's any cases where we decreased an army point count, but almost everything is going to line up with, or at least be fairly close to, what you would expect in an actual 10th edition Warhammer 40k game. And I think that's just a lot cooler. Personally, I like it more. And also, I've just increased the cap a little bit, so you're going to be able to have bigger armies without hitting your population cap, your army point cap, whatever we want to call it these days. Because you're going to have a 2,000 point limit, and you're going to get 100 for every point that you capture. So overall, much less restrictive than the old system was. So even though you're going to see units that can cost 150, 200, as much as 500 plus army points, if you're talking about super units, you're still going to get a lot more units on the field than you could before. So, win-win, I think. It's more immersive to Warhammer, and it's bigger armies all around. And we've also dialed back upkeep, so it shouldn't kick in until you hit 500 army points, if I remember how I said that correctly. I've been doing these changes for several months now, and so some of them are a few months back, and I'm trying to remember what exactly I've done. I've got a changelog, but even the changelog isn't necessarily complete because I sometimes forget the things that I do. So, I try to keep it up to date though. It's kind of internal right now. I know the testers have access to it, but we'll worry about that later. Anyway, overall though, this is kind of the stuff we've been working on for Eternal. And like I said, there's a ton of new additions as well to the existing factions, and we've got Chaos coming as well. So I just hope it's going to be a little more fun overall when this goes out to the public. We've still got more work to do. I mean, I wish I could come out here and say, hey, we're ready to go. This is the video of it's open to the public, but we're not there yet. That's why I just wanted to get this out there, let you know what's going on, and I'm still planning to more videos as well. I'm going to try to keep them fairly simple. I'm not really planning on any big trailers or anything like that because those are going to take too much time away from development. But I will try to keep you guys a little more informed, at least, until we can get 0.6 out, because I've definitely got a lot to share. I didn't think it was going to take this long, though, truth be told. I really didn't want 0.6 to be out, on the year anniversary or something like that of Eternal's original 0.5 launch, but that's what it's looking like it might be. As much as I really didn't want that to be the case, man. Oh, well. Like I said, long story, a lot of stuff going on in real life, has been for a long time. Stressful work environment, to say the least. Not Eternal. Not Eternal. You guys are amazing. The community of Eternal has been nothing shy of amazing, and I really do mean that. So, let me know if there's anything you specifically just wanted, of course. As per usual, even if I'm not necessarily responding, I do read all the feedback in the feedback channels in Eternal and stuff like that, and I'm taking it all into account when I go in and I do balance changes and additions and things like that. So, let me know what you want to see, and let me know if you got any questions, things like that, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay toasty, everyone. GitHub was being a little shit. I didn't want to use it anymore, so we're not. We switched. And there it is. The patented, trademarked, eternal development server. Trademark. Very, very important. Never crash, please. It's a pie.